In 1817, Jane Austen died, but her estate, in 1818, publishes her last two novels. The first novel of which, Northanger Abbey, is actually her first novel that she had ever completed. We have the original drafts of the novel, and it was finished in the 1790s, early 1800s. But she, at the time, set it aside and stopped revising and editing it, only to later then write Sense and Sensibility, which was her first published novel. The second of the two novels that were published posthumously was Persuasion, the novel that she was working on and editing and revising up until her very death. In fact, we have there are actually two endings to Persuasion, and we can see the original ending and the new revised ending, something that she added not too much before she died. And I want to say right now that I'm happy that I got to read these two books, because I think, well, first off, I love Jane Austen novels. So more Austen is, as far as I'm concerned, good. But I cannot help but think that neither of these two books should have been published. I find it very questionable to publish an author's work posthumously. It just seems wrong, especially for somebody like Austen, who was known in her family as being very diligent when it came to editing her own works. To then turn around and just publish her unedited works, I think, is just very artistically unsound. And we can see this particularly with Northanger Abbey, which, as I said, was not something that she worked on diligently. Northanger Abbey was written, the first draft was written, and she kind of just set it aside for years, and it reads like that. Persuasion as well. I think there are parts of Persuasion that seem like they could have been done better, right? It needed an extra pass through or two. And it's something that would have been fixed had she not died. But I will say that I am thankful that I got to read them, because while I think it's artistically questionable, I do think it is really useful to see how Jane Austen went from an amateur author to, I think, one of the best authors in the English language. In my opinion. I mean, I guess other people might think otherwise, but I think she is. And to see that transition from the juvenile to the series, I think, is very fascinating. It's something that we're not going to get. Well, I'm going to try to talk about it. I'm going to talk about both books in this video. But before I forget, I have written it yet again in my script to remind myself to say, thank you for watching these videos. I'm Steven. This is Reading with Steven. This channel is Reading with Steven. And this is part of my ongoing attempt to read all of my fiction books before buying new ones. You know, we're always buying books. I want to read the books that I bought, not just buy them, not just have an ever increasing collection of novels. As well, it affords me the opportunity of talking about the books in a way that I do not have normally, because most of the people I know, they don't read, or at the very least, they don't read very much. And so I took this opportunity. I made this channel all for the purposes of reading, and I appreciate you if you are listening, or if you're watching this. I appreciate that. I appreciate if you like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stuff like this, because honestly, it just makes me feel good. I don't really care that the channel does well. I just really like seeing the likes. But more importantly than both of those is leaving a comment, because I like to talk about books. The whole purpose of this channel is to talk about books. And if it's just me, then, you know, it's just me yelling into the wind. But if other people have ideas, then please share them below. All right. So first thing, we're going to talk about Northanger Abbey. Now, I'm not going to split hairs. I do not think Northanger Abbey is very good. It's not bad per se, but coming off what I consider to be Austen's masterpiece, Emma, to go back to Northanger Abbey is a bit of a whiplash, right? You go from reading one of Austen's greatest books to a effectively unrevised family joke. And because that's what it is. Northanger Abbey tells the story of Kathleen Morland, and it really is just a satire. It's a satire on Gothic romances and Gothic novels, which specifically Mysteries of Udolpho by Anne Radcliffe, which is a book that I doubt anybody has ever read. Unless, of course, you're really into 18th century Gothic romances or just really like Jane Austen. And as somebody who really likes Jane Austen, I haven't even read it. But what is interesting, what is fascinating about it is it is a satire. It makes fun of the tropes, the idea of a wife being abused and murdered by her husband for mysterious reasons, and the ideas of a large Gothic castle in the storms, and there's mysteries, and none of that happens in this. Which is very pointedly, Kathleen Morland, who is a character that reads a lot, thinks that maybe the stuff in her novels will come true. And inevitably, it doesn't. And that leads to a lot of hijinks. What is fascinating, I think, about the fact that this is a satire of the Gothic novels is in a few books we're going to be reading the Bronte sisters. The Bronte sisters lived the life of Catherine Morland, right? They were reading all of these Gothic novels, and the Bronte sisters, 40 years later, 30, 40 years later, after Austen has written Northanger Abbey, they write the Gothic novels. Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre are like the prototypical Gothic novels. When you think of a Gothic novel, you're thinking of the Bronte sisters. So they take the same novels that Jane Austen is reading, and instead of laughing at them, they just go for it. They gun for it. And I think that's really interesting to see the difference, the different temperaments between those two authors, even so late, even in such different times. Now, despite Austen laughing at the Gothic genre and its tropes, it is clear that Austen actually really does like the novels and supports her fellow female authors. I think it's important to note that the novel at this time is, in fact, novel, right? It has just come about. Tom Jones, I think, is considered the first novel to be written in English, and that is in the 1750s. So 60 years later, the novel is still a new art form, and as a new art form, it has been adopted primarily by women, as noted by Anne Radcliffe being one of the most famous authors of Jane Austen's time, and then Jane Austen herself becoming a famous author. But if you think back to the 19th century, it's not until Charles Dickens that we start getting famous male authors of the novel, and that is again because it's new. Now, since it's so heavily female dominated, the novel writing space is so heavily female dominated. Obviously, it is disparaged. It's not considered very serious. Most men aren't, for example, reading novels, or if they are, they're not admitting to it. And Austen talks about this, and in probably the most fascinating section in Northanger Abbey, and probably the only really reason to read it, is her, I don't know if screed is the right word for it, is her speech. And this is not a speech from the character. This is a speech from the narrator, from Austen herself, about novel writing. And she says, talking about Catherine Morland and her friend and what they do, she says, quote, "And if a rainy morning deprived them of other enjoyments, they were still resolute in meeting in defiance of wet and dirt, and shut themselves up to read novels together." Yes, novels. For I will not adopt that ungenerous and impolitic custom so common with novel writers of degrading, by their own contemptuous censure, the very performances to the number of which they are themselves adding, joining with their greatest enemies in bestowing the harshest epithets on such works, and scarcely ever permitting them to be read by their own heroine, who, if she accidentally take up a novel, is sure to turn over its insipid pages with disgust. Alas! If the heroine of one novel be not patronized by the heroine of another, from whom can she expect protection and regard? I cannot approve it. Let us leave it to the reviewers to abuse such effusions of fancy at their leisure, and over every new novel to talk in threadbare strains of the trash with which the press now groans. Let us not desert one another. We are an injured body. Although our productions have afforded more extensive and unaffected pleasure than those of any other literary corporation in the world, no species of composition has been so decried. From pride, ignorance, or fashion, our foes are almost as many as our readers, and while the abilities of the 900th Bridger of the History of England, or the man who collects and publishes in one volume some dozen lines of Milton, Pope, and Prior, with a paper from the Spectator and a chapter from Sterne, are eulogized by 1,000 pens, there seems almost a general wish of decrying the capacity and undervaluing the labor of the novelist, and of slighting the performances which have had only genius, wit, and taste to recommend them. I am no novel reader. I seldom look into novels. Do not imagine that I often read novels. It is really very well for a novel. Such is the common cant. And what are you reading, miss? Oh, it is only a novel, replies the young lady, while she lays down her book with affected indifference, or momentary shame. It is only Cecilia, or Camilla, or Belinda, or in short only some work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed, in which the most thorough knowledge of human nature, the happiest delineation of the varieties of the liveliest effusions of wit and humor are conveyed to the world in the best chosen language. Now, had the same young lady been engaged with a volume of The Spectator, instead of such a work, how proudly would she have produced the book, and told its name, though the chances must be against her being occupied by any part of that voluminous publication, of which either the matter or manner would not disgust a young person of taste. The substance of its papers are so often consisting in the statement of improbable circumstances, unnatural characters, and topics of conversation which no longer concern anyone living, and their language, too, frequently so coarse as to give no very favorable idea of the age that could endure it. Now, what's interesting is that the Spectator that Austen is talking about is not the same Spectator, the political magazine in England that exists today. It's actually an earlier form, but it's very similar. It was full of morality stories and philosophical tracts, and things to really things to kind of make you a better person, if you will. So all in all, probably not that different from the modern day Spectator, but as we can see, Austen did not have a high view of the nonfiction of her time. And in fact, the same sentiment is later pronounced by the characters themselves, specifically between Catherine and her love interest, Henry Tilney. When they are talking about art, quote, "Oh, no, I only mean what I have read about. It always puts me in mind of the country that Emily and her father traveled through in the Mysteries of Udolpho. But you never read novels, I dare say." "Why not?" "Because they are not clever enough for you. Gentlemen read better books." The person, be it gentleman or lady, who has not pleasure in a good novel must be intolerably stupid. I have read all Miss Radcliffe's works, and most of them with great pleasure. The Mysteries of Udolpho, when I had once begun it, I could not lay down again. I remember finishing it in 2 days, my hair standing on end the whole time. So we see that Austen really feels strongly about this. She, at least at the time, I'm sure she continued to feel strongly about it as a published author. But this defense of the author, of the novel rather, is well, I would like to say that it's a part of its time, but you still see these arguments today that novels and fiction in general are silly and that they're not worth spending the time on doing, when I think that that is obviously inaccurate. So few men anymore read books, and I think that's to their loss, because I think there is a lot to be gained, as Jane Austen talks about, even back then, that there's a lot to be gained, that there is something to be said in the drama of it, in the well-writtenness of it, that the greatest powers of the mind are displayed, in which the most thorough knowledge of human nature and the happiest delineation of its varieties and the liveliest effusions of its wit and humor are conveyed to the world. There is something to be said for that. And we have talked about different issues that come up in previous books. The African trilogy by Chinua Achebe allows readers to explore colonialism, the colonization of Africa, and the religious conversion and the trauma and whatnot, as well as the gender stereotypes, which to this day affect us. And we're able to do that because of the novel in a way that makes sense to people, right? Humans are a very narrative-driven group of people. It's one thing to tell somebody that it's bad to smoke. It's another thing to say, I was a former smoker and now I'm dying, right? That's a better story. It's not a good story, but it's a more compelling story, I should say. And by making compelling stories, we're able to learn and to understand the world around us in a better way than we would be otherwise. For both good and ill, I might have you know, a lot of politicians today make stories. If you think to the if you're American, the State of the Union address or whatever major speeches your government leaders give, they always bring in guests because they always want to put a face on the policy positions of the administrations that they're running. And this is for the same reason. It's the story. The story is what compels us into understanding something that would be philosophical is now brought into a real stark realism for us by the use of stories. Something that Austen understood in 1817, or before 1817, in the 1800s, and something which we apparently still keep forgetting, is that the stories are what's powerful, and something that we need to keep going. With that said, Northanger Abbey, that's pretty much the only interesting part about Northanger Abbey, unless you're really into satires about Gothic novels. And I'm not. As far as the story itself goes, it's kind of ho-hum. It is interesting for me, as somebody who's read other Jane Austen novels and has noticed the patterns, that you still see the pattern of the young ingenue falling in love and getting married to a more educated and older man. You see the glimmerings of social commentary, with the general being very money hungry, despite being ostensibly upper class. He is very much just about the money, and that is something that'll come up again and again in Austen. So you do see that, but it's not very well done. And so I think we can set Northanger Abbey aside and talk about the much more interesting Persuasion. Me trying desperately not to flip my computer off my leg. So Persuasion, as I've said, Austen's final novel. It's the novel that she was writing when she died, and something that she was editing and revising almost up until the very end. as noted by the fact that there are two endings to the novel. There's the original ending and then her revised ending, which is the one that got published. Persuasion, probably one of the least famous of Austen's novels, which I think unfair, with the exception of the 2022 much maligned Netflix version, which I haven't watched. I should watch it. I'm going to watch that. We're going to watch that. I'll tell you my thoughts and feelings about that in a second. But it takes I think, one of the best quotes in the... There we go. There it goes. Flipping my computer off. It takes one of the best quotes in the book and recontextualizes it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think that sucks that it's one of the best written pieces that Austen has ever written, that they changed. Specifically, the quote, "Now they were as strangers, nay, worse than strangers, for they could never be acquainted. It was perpetual estrangement." Where Northanger Abbey is a very juvenile work with characters who are pretty undeveloped, except as, ideas. Persuasion, I think, really you see the power of Austen's characterization in Persuasion. You see how her characters become fully realized in a way that isn't true in Northanger Abbey. Anne Elliot, for example, is ostensibly a good person. However, she has moments where she is kind of a bitch. And I mean that without judgment. I love her for these moments because I think they make her a much more realistic character, right? Say, if we look at Elizabeth Bennet or even Emma Woodhouse, they are idealistic, right? They're idealistic. They're not bad people per se. They are misguided people. Elizabeth, in her preference of Wickham over Darcy, it's understandable that she feels that way because Darcy is not a nice person when they first meet, and Wickham is a very nice person when they first meet. And so it's understandable that she would get taken in because we ourselves as readers get taken in. And Emma Woodhouse, the worst thing that she does is say that Miss Bates talks too much, which is a big scandal, and it's not nice what she said. But as far as faux pas go, it's not that big. Anne Elliot, on the other hand, takes that to a different level. She says, or at least we see her think things. She has mean thoughts. In that sense, I think she's very similar to real people. We have uncharitable thoughts when thinking about other people. We don't necessarily say them, just as Anne Elliot doesn't say them. But she thinks them, and we see her thinking them, and that is something that we haven't seen previously in Austen's novels. For example, when Captain Wentworth says early on when they first re-meet that he prefers a woman that isn't so changeable, but rather stands by her beliefs and isn't so influenced by others, a very pointed barb towards Anne. She later throws it back in his face. Again. I need a table. She throws it back in his face when her cousin, the woman that Captain Wentworth is courting, I guess, flirting with would probably be more accurate, jumps off a ledge hoping that Captain Wentworth will catch her. Even after he tells her to be careful. The cousin gets hurt, and Anne's first thought when talking to Captain Wentworth afterwards is not, "Oh my God, I hope my cousin's safe." It's, quote, "Anne wondered whether it ever occurred to him, Captain Wentworth, now to question the justness of his own previous opinion as to the universal felicity and advantage of firmness of character, and whether it might not strike him that, like all other qualities of the mind, it should have its proportions and limits. She thought it could scarcely escape him to feel that a persuadable temper might sometimes be as much in favor of happiness as a very resolute character. Her first thought when her cousin, whom she does love, goes into a coma after hitting her head is, damn, should have chosen me. I'm not in a coma. That's a psychotic thing to think. That's a crazy thing to have thought. And I love Anne for having thought it, because it's something that, other people, is a very realistic thing to have thought, is to take that kind of selfish, like, I don't care about my cousin, I just care about me in this exact moment, only to later on remind yourself, oh, no, we do have to care about other people. But that moment of selfishness, I think, is beautiful, and it is in keeping with what makes Persuasion great. There's another point when Anne is, again, just a mean-spirited person. Or at least initially a mean-spirited person, only to temper herself afterwards. When she finds herself at a party with Captain Wentworth, quote, they were actually on the same sofa, for Mrs. Musgrove had most readily made room for him. They were divided only by Mrs. Musgrove. It was no insignificant barrier indeed. Mrs. Musgrove was of a comfortable, substantial size, infinitely more fitted by nature to express good cheer and good humour than tenderness and sentiment, and while the agitations of Anne's slender form and pensive face may be considered as very completely screened, Captain Wentworth should be allowed some credit for his self-command with which he attended to her large, fat sighings over the destiny of a son whom alive nobody had cared for. Personal size and mental sorrow have certainly no necessary proportions. A large, bulky figure has as good a right to be in deep affections as the most graceful set of limbs in the world, but, fair or not fair, there are unbecoming conjunctions which reason will patronize in vain, which taste cannot tolerate, which ridicule will seize. Out of nowhere, Anne Elliot, sitting there at this party, wishing that she could be closer to the man that she loves, sits there and is like, dang, this fat woman's sitting next to me. Who think? It's such a mean-spirited thing to say, is, wow, this fat lady is stopping me from seeing the man that I like. Also, it's kind of disgusting how fat people are sad. What kind of a thing is that to think? That's a horrible thing. You're a horrible person if you think that way. Anne is a bad person. She's not a bad person. Because, again, these are all internal thoughts. And we can't judge ourselves on our inside thoughts. It's on how we express those thoughts that we should be judged on. But by Austen sharing Anne's bad thoughts, something which hasn't happened before, even Emma Woodhouse does not think this. We're not privy to these thoughts by Emma Woodhouse, I should say, but we are privy to them with Anne. We intrinsically see that darkness, that meanness that we don't see, that we've never seen before in anybody, with the exception of maybe some of the rakes, right? And when we're putting our protagonist on the same level as Mr. Wickham, that's it's good. It's so Persuasion. This is what I'm talking about when I say that I'm just sad that Austen wasn't able to finish this book, because this is such a good book. This could have been so good. At the risk of you thinking that it's just Anne that is an awful person, that's not true. There are many characters who are terrible people in this, or not terrible people, but are willing to go along with terrible things for their own benefit. We see Mrs. Smith, who is a friend of Anne's. Mrs. Smith is a down on her luck widow. who has had dealings with Mr. Elliot, who is Anne's cousin and the person who is trying to marry her. Mr. Elliot is attempting to marry Anne for his own benefit. Mrs. Smith knows, though, Mr. Elliot. And she knows him to be a terrible person who has mistreated his first wife. He's a widower as well. He mistreated his first wife to make her miserable. He was cruel to Mrs. Smith, who is the widow of his best friend. He drove his best friend into debt before he died and then wouldn't help his best friend's widow, Mrs. Smith. All of this she knows. And instead of warning Anne off of marrying her, Mrs. Smith goes, like, congratulations on getting married. I hope you're very happy. Knowing full well that she won't be. Why? When Anne finds out about this, she says, why didn't you warn me? And the reason is because Mrs. Smith is like, I don't know. I didn't think I could stop you. And honestly, I thought you would be more useful to me if you married him. You'd be able to talk to him and, make him feel better, or to make him help me. These are things that just don't come up in previous Austen novels. And it's very possible that had Jane had more time to work on it, these things wouldn't have been in it. And I think it would have been a worse novel. But I just really like this. I really like this novel, and I think it's really sad that Austen died before she was able to finish it. I think there is one last thing that might be worth talking about, and it is I think it's a very tricky subject because Austen's writing this. She's in her 40s when she writes Persuasion. And she's obviously hasn't been married. She has almost become married twice. The first time, the man's family thought that she wasn't good enough to marry and rushed him away before they could become engaged. And the second one was an engagement that she accepted but later recanted because she realized that the dude was horrible and she hated him. And I think there is a temptation to read into Persuasion the same thoughts and feelings. Austen kind of replaying these biographical notes in her life. And I say the temptation because I'm not sure that one should do it. So there's this debate within literary studies about how we should read books. Whether we should read books completely individually, as if they are a complete unit, and ignore everything outside of that. This is something favored by the new criticism of the 1920s, and probably most famously by within the internet by Roland Barthes. I think it was 1964, his essay on the death of the author, in which he put forward that the author's intentions don't matter. Their life, nothing about the author matters, because a book exists independently of everything else, and we should read the book as independent of everything else. Obviously, other people, not as highly thought of, think that we should only care about what the author thinks. This is what is referred to as the intentional fallacy, that we should try to discover what the author themselves thinks, and that's how we should understand the book. And I'm never sure exactly where to go with this, because on the one hand, obviously, I don't agree with the intentional fallacy, but at the same time, how much does it not matter at all? Does Austen's opinion not matter at all? I think it should, and I think there is something to be gleaned, something to be understood about the characters, about the writing, about the plots from Austen's life. But on the other hand, again, I do agree that a novel should be its own thing, right? We should be reading these novels as their own artistic thing. We don't do that with other artistic forms. You wouldn't look into a director's life when talking about a movie. Most people, I don't think, would. So why would we do that with a book? I don't know. I don't know where I fall on that, but I do think it's something to keep in mind. And I want to say that I talked about that in one of my videos. I thought I talked about this in one of my videos, but I don't think I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember. That's Persuasion. That's Northanger Abbey. That is Jane Austen done with. Interestingly enough, that's also the A's done with. I've read all of the A authors. So that's very exciting. We get to move on to the B's. And I just want to thank you for watching these videos. Thank you for supporting the channel, for supporting me, and I hope that you have, if you've watched all of these videos, assuming, of course, or if you've even watched only a few of them, I hope they've been informative. I hope they've been interesting. I hope that you have enjoyed them. Our next book is going to be by James Baldwin. Go Tell It on the Mountain. It's the first of the B authors. So that'll be exciting. Story of a young gay black boy in Harlem in the 1920s or 1930s. I think it's the 1930s. It's a good book. I hope you'll be here when I talk about that. Which I don't think it'll take me too long. I've already started the script for it, so hopefully by the time this video comes out, that video will not be too much further behind it. But thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment. Talk about books. Because I love reading comments. I love talking about books. I love reading what other people think about books. I love that back and forth. So I hope that if you have thoughts and feelings, that you'll put them in. Other than that, like, subscribe, all that jazz, and just know that I thank you personally for watching all of these videos. And yeah, I hope you keep doing it. Go out, keep reading. Thank you.